tell people the mega massive breaking news that no one's covering.
Well, for a long time, you've been covering how Bilderberg meets in secret with all these powerful corporations. They're coming up with long-term strategies. They've had these long-term strategies for a very long time, but there is a tactic that they're putting it together. They're going to make their move. They've had this fast-track trade agreement where the president can go in and with just a simple majority, he can negotiate without getting the Congress involved. And then once the Congress gets involved, they can put in just a simple majority can pass these things. It's not like passing a treaty. So they can agree with these trade agreements, and what they're doing is they're doing it in secret. You look at the terminology that they're using. They're using stakeholders to talk about this. This is something that just came out. They had their 19th meeting, and they're meeting 4 or 5 times a year on this Trans-Pacific Partnership, as well as a Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement.
And they're
TAFTA.
transferring all power to this outside of law, just like the EU started as a trade agreement.
Exactly.
It's incredible.
And you look at the terminology that they're using. They're talking about stakeholders. Now, this is a memo from the U.S. Trade Representative. This was September the 9th. They had their last meeting August the 21st. And he said, this afternoon, U.S. Trade Rep Michael Froman reached out to a broad cross-section of stakeholders to join him on a call to discuss the TPP. He says, we very much view stakeholder input, whether through our cleared advisors or other stakeholders, as absolutely critical. He said,
that's Agenda 21 talk.
Exactly,
only the big stakeholders are allowed to talk.
And he says, everyone's not going to be 100% pleased with what we do, but we want to guarantee that we're going to seek your input and we're going to consult with you. Now, who are the stakeholders? 170 participants. At the most, they're having about 500-600 trade representatives from these corporations. Now, senators are not allowed to see what's going on. The press is not allowed to see what's going on. Congressmen aren't allowed to see what's going on. We had Ron Wyden, who has spoken out a lot about the secretive stuff that the NSA is doing, the criminal actions, the illegal things that they're doing. He pointed out, he made a statement the 23rd of May, 2012, and what he said is the majority of Congress is being kept in the dark as to the substance of the TPP negotiations, while representatives of U.S. corporations like Halliburton, Chevron, Comcast, and the MPAA are being consulted and made privy to the details of the agreement. So basically, and this is something we've seen echoed from other countries. It's not just the U.S. that's talking about this.
That's because it's the big corporations, to the Rockefellers, that made the UN, that set this up to circumvent nation states to then loot everybody, a.k.a. Obamacare, written by the insurance companies.
Right. And they're setting up these things called investor state tribunals. They're elevating the corporations to the level of the states so that they have these, if they've got a trade disagreement, then they basically can come in as a co-equal to the state.
And by states, you mean national states?
Yes, the national states. Yeah, that's exactly. Not
sub-states don't even enter the equation.
No. They can come into the United States, and we've already seen this happening with NAFTA. We've seen billions of dollars of lawsuits. They can come in and sue them and say that their regulation is keeping them from keeping their investors from realizing.
Well, I mean here's a real-world example. China can ship any poisonous melamine-filled product, bad herbs, vitamins, you name it, in. We won't sell any of it. 90+% of our pharmacologicals are made over there. Mm-hmm. That's on record. Mm-hmm. It's even higher than that. It's some incredible amount. But if you try to sell lettuce, they come and harass you and shut you down.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, we're not allowed to operate. This is feudalism because the globalists have already made their deals with the Chi-Coms to use their 300 million slaves. They talk about slavery all day. We're Steven Spielberg talking about Foxconn labs.
Right. With
the suicide nets. No, it's all about getting us to fight with each other, talking about slavery 160 years ago.
And there's a lot of organizations that are waking up to this. I mean, you got people who are looking at it from the privacy aspect because all these different regulations,
CISPA and NSA
SOPA and ACTA and all of that, they were coming at us with a copyright angle, right? So they were basically, it's the sort of thing where the major corporations, quote unquote, own everything.
And they said no judge, no jury. If this group wants you, you're shut down.
That's right. It's something that, the IMF years ago and the World Bank, they were accused of what was called rent seeking. They were going out and massively indebting third world countries. Towards the end of the 70s, from 76 to 80, they were increasing the debt of the third world countries by 20% a year. Now that's something we see happening with our debt. That's something that's coming up in just a couple of weeks. It's not the shutdown is not really a shutdown. It's simply a slowdown. But we're getting ready to come up to yet another case where they've got to raise the debt ceiling. The estimate is that's going to happen October the 17th. So what we're seeing, if you look at the American debt, it's going up like a third world country did 30, 40 years ago.
And that's what the 2002 documents said when Stiglitz went public from the World Bank, is they plan to do that in Europe in the United States. And this isn't even our debt, most of it. They've signed us onto their debt. This is economic seeds. They're taking over.
Right, right. Well, we've been, with the Federal Reserve, we've essentially been on an interest-only loan for about 100 years. And the income tax is simply just paying the interest on the debt, as the Grace Commission under Reagan pointed out. So what we've been on is essentially a balloon note. They want to keep growing this debt at an ever faster rate, and it's just going to collapse. Now they're bringing in the insurance company. So the Republicans are saying, let's move on. Let's.
And by the way, it was all planned.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to go back.
Oh, yeah.
We're 100 years this December 23rd since it happened, and they admit the plan was totally destroy the middle class in 100 years. They've done it.
That's right.
I mean, these people really have their act together.
Well, you talk about rent-seeking status, which is what they did to the third world countries. That's what they're doing to Americans now on an individual basis, right? It's a rope-a-dope situation. Lower the interest rates, make easy loans, then change the amount of it and make it so that people can't pay it back. You know, they're underwater.
It's like an arm.
And take it, yeah, exactly, take it in. So that's the point of where we are right now. But it's also, when we look at this Pacific Partnership, you look at this Atlantic Partnership and how they're bringing the three together, as you pointed out in the documentary several years ago, they're also coming after the internet. They're going to use copyright issues to basically turn everyone into renters from the big corporations, and then they're also going to use that as fascist control to be able to shut down anybody without any due process, because constitutional courts and laws don't exist anymore. The other thing they're going to do is they're going to use these trade agreements to shut down any GMO labeling laws. That's another thing that a lot of countries are concerned about. They're also going to stop any kind of regulation of the banks that would be like a reinstatement of Glass-Steagall or something that's going to stop the reckless speculation and derivatives.
Oh, no, since the 2008 takeover worldwide, they've increased derivatives.
Yeah, yeah. So they want to make sure that with these partnerships, with these trade agreements, that they're going to essentially put in CISPA. They're going to put in prohibitions from any kind of regulation that's going to stop that or turn that back. They're going to prohibit any labeling of GMOs. They're going to come after pharmacological patents in countries like New Zealand. They're very concerned about the fact that they make generic drugs available to their population. Big pharmaceutical companies want to get a piece of that. So
it's basically mega corporations that establish world government, and the point is they're now really implementing it.
Yes.
We're getting down to the final nuts and bolts.
That's the point.
And there's no debate about it anywhere. We're covering it. But a lot of interest, and even governments are complaining, but there's no corporate media coverage.
And there's no oversight. They complain about it, but they're not allowed to see it, and the press is not allowed to go in and cover it or witness it. It's just like Bilderberg. They keep everybody out just like Bilderberg. All you see are press releases that are put out by the organization itself, just like Bilderberg.
And what's crazy is they're not just rich guys that want to run the whole show. They admit in all their documents they want to impoverish us as a tool of control because it's good for the earth.
Absolutely.
But not good for them. It's like Obama saying you can't have cars, you can't have air conditioners, you can't have anything in Africa. While clean energy and systems don't hurt them, it's a tool of control.
It's a kind of corporate fascism, and it is fascism.
Corporate slavery.
Yeah, but Hitler went with a fascist model, unlike the Soviets, right? He saw that as being the end goal. He wanted to get to a situation where he controlled everything. Of course, he was a megalomaniac, but he saw it as an intermediate step, fascism. And that's what we're seeing here, is an intermediate step of fascism. And just like we're going to see in healthcare and many other areas, like you pointed out, they're putting out of business the small competitors, just like the banks put out of business the small competitors to them. You saw banks failing, tremendous number of banks failing every year after the collapse in 2008, but the big banks got bailed out. The small banks went away. Same thing is happening with insurance companies. They're going to pull all of that in. It's just a method of gaining corporate control. But the thing that we really need to look out for, which are the TPP and the TAFTA agreements, because that is NAFTA on steroids, and it's completely replacing our due process. They set up these tribunals, and they put taxpayers on the hook for paying for these tribunals as well as for the outcome. Billions of dollars to these corporations. We have no say-so, and local businesses have no recourse against these same laws. It's only the multinational corporations that can come in and do these investor state tribunals.
Well, you're right, and I'm really glad that you're covering this because clearly Obamacare is another private tax. It's not just a tax, as the Supreme Court said. It's a tax to insurance companies and banks. I mean, really? People got upset about $5 fees to use Bank of America cards when it's your money. Mm-hmm. Now it's a tax to them and it's a screw job, we've got to call Congress. We've got to call the media. We've got to call talk radio, because the average talk show host isn't bad. They're just uninformed. The average newspaper reporter locally isn't bad. They're just uninformed. We've got to reach out to them and explain to them, say the names again of the agreements and what's happening as they basically go into the final phases of a private corporate fascist world government.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership had its first meeting in 2010. Now, they were putting together things, obviously, before that. They were even meeting for the TPP.
But now they're merging the Asia-Pacific thing with the North American and the EU. It's all on record.
And TAFTA just started this year, started the spring of this year, having their first meeting.
Because they finally lined up over a decade all the internal deals.
That's right. So they're making these deals behind closed doors, no elected representatives allowed, no press coverage. They are completely changing our legal structure, and they're going to shut out any control of the corporations through these agreements if we let them.
And again, conservatives think, well, corporations, they're good. No, no. These are corporations acting as government.
That's right.
Above government.
And these are multinational corporations. You're not going to have a completely domestic corporation be able to participate in these investor state tribunals. They can't complain about this. This is only for multinationals. Only multinational corporations are going to have the status of a government, of a state.
Let me dig out the article. A perfect example of this was the Forbes article where they go, hey, wait a minute, the communist Chinese, they call the shots.
Yeah.
They own our debt.
Right.
We're being dictated to like Mexico when it was indebted to the U.S. or something. And it's all done through fraud. This is globalism. This is the total takeover of society that we're witnessing. David Knight, great job. Please stay on this. And I hope the listeners will take this video once it's archived on YouTube and other places from prisonplanet.tv and get it out to everybody you know. NAFTA and GATT is being merged with the EU and with the Asia-Pacific Union. This is so huge, and it ties into this healthcare tax to the banksters.